All right. Can everybody hear me? Great. Well, thank you so much for coming. I know, I don't know what it is with me in this time slot. Last year I had a presentation at 5:30 on Thursday, and all I kept thinking to myself is, man, everybody here must want to go grab a beer instead of being here. But thank you for coming. I hope this session is valuable for you. So my name is John Mancuso. I'm a solutions architect. I've been with AWS for a little over, or just about 3.5 years now. And over that time, one of the things that has brought me the most joy as being an architect is helping my customers save money. And so as soon as I saw this session title, I said, I have to take it. Because I know if I can show customers how to build a website that's scalable and highly available for pennies a month, that you would save money, very likely. So that's what I'm here to do, and let's get on with it. So I took that requirement, the title, very seriously, and I came up with a couple of requirements. Like I said, I wanted to build a site that was going to cost you less than $1 a month to operate. That's the definition of pennies for me. And it had to be highly available, scalable, and secure. So what are the typical ways of building a website, right? What are the traditional ways? Typically, if you're a developer, you might write code in Rails or PHP, .NET, Django, whatever your favorite framework is, and publish that to a web server. If you're, if you're not a developer, maybe a content editor, you might leverage a content management system like WordPress, Drupal, Joomla, Alfresco. One of these tools. Either way, what you're going to end up with, very likely, if you're deploying on AWS, is an architecture that looks like this. So this is a standard reference architecture that shows a highly available, highly scalable system that leverages CloudFront for content caching, auto-scaling to grow and shrink with demand, RDS with multiple availability zone mode to handle failovers of the database. If there's a need for it. So it's a great architecture, but it's not going to come in for less than $1 a month. No matter how you shake it, it's not going to come in for less than $1 a month. So I had to scrap that and start thinking of something else. So what are the alternate solutions? Well, really, saying a website is a pretty darn broad thing, right? So rather than, what I had to do is narrow the scope a little bit and say what it is that I want to build. And I wanted to build a site that kind of is probably relevant for, for all the people that would be in this room tonight. And so to do that, I said, all right, let me make a fictitious company. So my alias at Amazon is jman, J-M-A-N. It's something that's kind of stuck. So if you ever want to email me, jman@amazon.com. But I wanted to build this fictitious company called Jman the Maker. The idea behind this company is people will upload a photo to me, and maybe I use my MakerBot or whatever other kind of tools that I have. When I first started building, I had a hammer and a screwdriver on the slide, but then I said, all right, I'll just get rid of that. So I use whatever tools that I have to make a product and ship it to you. That's the idea of this fictitious site. And it's a pretty simple kind of thing, but something I think that's pretty relevant. So people would have a home page that describes the business, a start making page where we're going to allow you folks to upload a photo, and an admin page where only I'll be able to log in and see photos that have been uploaded and start work on them, maybe give an estimate, whatever it is. And lastly, I need to have a blog, right? Something where I'm going to be giving information about what it is that we do and getting traction in the market. So that's the site that I want to build. And we're going to do this today, by the way, live on stage. I'm going to build this site for you, and it's going to cost less than $1 a month. All right, so what services can we use? We can't use EC2. So what services can we use? Well, the primary one that I want to leverage is Amazon S3. I'm sorry, in the last slide I should have said there's about 40 other, or probably 50 now after all the announcements. I don't know the exact number anymore. But the service that we want to use is Amazon S3. And what's great about S3 is it can serve static assets directly. So people think of it as storage, but it also can act as a web server. If you upload an HTML page to it, people can hit that HTML page and see it, as long as you give it the appropriate permissions. So S3 is going to be our primary place for running this site that we're going to build. And what's great about S3 is it's 3 cents per gig per month. So there's no question that we can meet our less than $1 a month requirement. I mean, even with a pretty large site, we could probably still meet that without any problem. But does it meet the other requirements, right? Can we do authentication? Are we going to be allowed to have photos getting uploaded and restrict who can see the content that's been uploaded, that kind of thing? So that's a question that we still need to answer. I'm going to come back to that question in a minute. But just like we had in the traditional solution, we have kind of two modes of operation. For developers, you can do things like write Angular JS frameworks or HTML5 code with JavaScript to build a static site, right? Something that you can host in S3. Or you can leverage, if you're more on the CMS side, you can leverage a static content generator. These are some of the popular ones out there. There's Jekyll, Octopress, and Pelican. There's a whole list of all the other ones out there. There's, I mean, probably hundreds. I don't know the number. But if you go to staticgen.com, you'll see the list of the most popular static site generators out there. So what is a static site generator? Well, it's very similar to a traditional CMS in that it supports things like themes. So you can write simple text and actually have it look pretty in the browser. It's going to create artifacts like tag clouds and have blog post archives. So it's going to take some basic content that you're going to author and present it in a nice way to your end users. What's different about it what's different from a traditional CMS is that in a traditional CMS, you're typically updating, when you use the editors, you're updating, what the CMS is doing is updating a database, and then anybody who's hitting the site is getting content out of that database. Static site generator is going to precompile your entire site for you so that you can upload it to a web server. In our case, we want to use S3 as the web server. So that's what's different about it. Some people say, all right, do we need to be a developer to use these tools or a sysadmin? From a developer perspective, the idea behind them is you're going to use a language called either Markdown or structured text. And it's supposed to look like human readable, right? It's not going to have a whole bunch of markup in the middle like HTML does, where maybe you really can't understand what it is that I'm looking at if I'm not like a true developer. So you really don't need to be a developer to use these tools. However, I'm going to give a little asterisk there that I probably should have put on the slide. A lot of the things that we're going to do are, for the more complicated thing, for the more dynamic parts, are going to be JavaScript based. So it couldn't hurt to be a developer if you're going to be, really creating this more into a dynamic site. If you're just building a static site, you do not need to be a developer. From a sysadmin perspective, there's no servers to administer here, right? You're just literally taking your HTML, copying it to S3, and that's it. So Amazon is taking care of the rest. So you definitely don't need to be a sysadmin. So just like we had a reference architecture before, I have a reference architecture here to share with you. It's much simpler. All we have is your end users hitting Route 53 for DNS. DNS is going to resolve them. I want to use not just S3, but S3 in conjunction with CloudFront. CloudFront is our content delivery network. So this is going to allow you to cache content closer to the end users to decrease latency. So we have Route 53, CloudFront, and S3. Pretty simple reference architecture. There's a link on the bottom there. By the way, all these slides will be available for you after the show, and the video will be available for you, after reInvent. I can't tell you exactly when, but it will be available. So as we start going through the actual code, don't worry about taking too many notes. Feel free if you'd like to, but have the video. Know that you'll have the video as a reference later on. All right, so those are the building blocks. I just want to talk to them again. So why Route 53? It's globally distributed. It's fast. It's reliable. From a DNS perspective, it's 100% uptime SLA. It's the only service that we have that meets that one particular point. It's also a registrar, so we never need to leave the AWS console to build this company, which is a pretty incredible thing. In the past, you may have had to use different DNS providers or registrars. Everything that we're going to do today, we could do from the console. We're going to use Amazon CloudFront, like I mentioned, to cache content closer to the end users. It also allows you to create like an index document and handle errors gracefully, so a lot of benefits there. And it supports SSL. So many people want to have their sites running on SSL with a custom domain name. You could do that with CloudFront. And if you could accept SNI, server name indication, it's completely free, right? You can upload your own certificate. You have to buy the certificate, but you upload the certificate, and it's free for all transactions. If you go the other way, if you don't use SNI, there is actually a pretty substantial charge. So just want to be clear about that. So we're going to use S3 for the storage of the site assets, and we're going to interact with S3 through the Amazon CLI, command line interface. We'll see what that looks like in a minute. And for the static site generator, I chose Pelican. It's not the most popular out there, but it's based on Python. I really liked the way that it works. Pick whatever one you want. The purpose of this talk isn't to show you, the ins and outs of any particular static site generator. It's how to make them work with AWS to build a dynamic site experience using static technology. So I still haven't answered the question of how we're handling the photo uploading. How are we handling the administrative page? And to do that, I'm going to have the JavaScript, AWS SDK for JavaScript in the browser, that's a mouthful, come to the rescue. So it's going to, through the JavaScript SDK, we're going to be able to leverage other tools, other AWS services, namely Amazon Cognito, which is our identity management service. It's going to be coupled with login with Amazon. So we'll actually use login with Amazon to do authentication, and then Cognito and identity and access management to do authorization. So I'm not going to talk about all these details right now. What I'd much rather do is actually go through and build the site with you. And hopefully that's going to answer some of the questions about what this is. So I'm going to jump pretty much into doing it right now. I want to tell you a little bit about some pre-work that I have, though, on the laptop, if you want to try and build this after the fact. I do have the Amazon command line tools. I have a text editor. I have Python and Pelican already pre-installed. So I have a resources slide at the end of the deck that you can just reference if you want to get to this point. I have an AWS account and a login with Amazon account and some pre-generated code snippets. I did that because there's just no way I could type fast enough to do all the things that we want to do, and you really don't want to see me type. It's not pretty. All right, so let's start the walkthrough. Let's start with the AWS console. Make sure I am still logged in here. Uh-oh. I should probably have got my internet sorted out beforehand. Is there wired internet in the room? Do you know? Here it is. Got it. I hope. Let's see. Refresh the page. Yay. All right. We have internet. Great. All right. So we have our AWS management console. It's logged in. We're going to start with S3. So I click on the S3 tab. I'm going to use the quick launch bar at the top. If you guys aren't familiar with it, definitely check it out. You can drag your favorite services up to the top and not have to look through the entire list of services that we have to do something simple. And I'm going to create a bucket. So a bucket is a storage container for files and objects. I'm just going to call this WEB203. Told you it was painful to watch me type. WEB203.origin. I'm going to put this bucket in a region. We'll use US standard. So this is going to control where the objects are stored. It's just the objects will be stored in one place on the globe. And I'll click create. All right, so we have the container for the bucket for where we're going to store the site. Now we're going to create a CloudFront distribution to deliver the site assets. So I clicked on CloudFront, click Create Distribution, select Web as the distribution methods. Now, it's nice that it's, since it's an S3 bucket, it's already pre-populated there. So I'm just going to click web203.origin, which is what we just created. I'm going to say restrict bucket access. What this means is that nobody will be able to hit S3 directly. They have to come in through CloudFront to access our site, and we definitely want to do that. We'll create an origin access identity, which is the mechanism for that, and it's going to automatically update the bucket policy for this to work. I want to make all requests to my site HTTPS. So I'm going to redirect HTTP to HTTPS. I'm going to have a custom CNAME, web203.jman.ws. So that's just the domain name that I have registered. I'm not going to upload an SSL cert. You really should, right? So we're going to get a page security error when we're going through this example. So please upload your own cert if you're going to be forcing everything to HTTPS. But I want to show you that it's possible. And we're going to set a default root objects to index.html. So if anybody comes to web203.jman.ws without a index.html, they'll see that file, index.html. We can enable logging. So I have a bucket here already set up for that. And that's all I need to do. Create the distribution. This is going to take about 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes to create the distribution, but it's fine. We got a lot of work to do. By the time we get there, it will be ready. And if not, I have a backup distribution. But next thing I want to do is create a DNS record, right? So we said we're going to use an alias of web203.jman.ws, but we haven't created that DNS record. So I have this hosted zone registered. If you wanted to, like I said, you could register your own domain name. I'll just jump to that actually really quick. So you can go to the register domain name tab here, do a search, so web203.net, whatever, do a check. That's available, so I could buy that right now, but I'm not going to, just to try and speed things up a little bit. I'm just going to use the domain I already have. So we go back to hosted zones in Route 53, select my zone, create a record set. This is going to be web203. And I'm going to use this alias feature. So alias basically means, first of all, it's free from a DNS resolution perspective. So that's a big win for our pennies a month kind of thing. But second of all, it's basically, it would allow us to do a naked domain as well. So if we wanted to do just jman.ws, we could do that with the alias, whereas we couldn't if that feature wasn't there. So I'm going to select the CloudFront distribution that we just picked. Again, it came right up in the drop-down list, and I'm going to hit create. All right, so we have our S3 bucket, we have our CloudFront distribution, and we have our DNS entry. Let's go build a site. So to do that, I'm going to drop down to a console, and I'm going to make a directory for it. Actually, first thing I'm going to do is activate my virtual environment. So this is a Python thing. You may not have to do this. It depends on which static site generator you use, but I'm going to do this right now. Source bin activate. OK, so now I'm registered in this virtual environment that has all my components already pre-installed. All right, so I'm going to make a directory. Projects, web203. If I go to that directory, we'll see it's completely empty, right? And to generate a shell site, I'm going to run a Pelican command, Pelican, quick start. I want to create the site in this directory. I'm going to have it called jman. Who's the author? John Mancuso. Default language is English. I don't need a prefix. Oops. Actually, you know what? Let me drop back out of there. I didn't like that. I should have said no. This directory, jman, John Mancuso, English, no. Do I now enable pagination? No. And I want to use a makefile. So we'll see that makefile. It's going to be a very important part of it, so that I want to definitely say yes to. And I'm not going to, so Pelican has the capabilities of automatically allowing you to publish to an FTP server, an SSH, Dropbox, S3. I'm saying no to S3 here. We will eventually be using S3, of course, but I'm going to use the AWS command line tools to do that instead of the default that it has created. All right, so now if I look in this directory, we'll see some stuff. We haven't built the site yet, so to do that, I'm going to go to a text editor. This can be whatever you like. I'm a big fan of Sublime, so that's what we'll use. And I'm going to create two folders. We want to have some pages and a blog, right? That's the basic shell of the site. So let me create a folder for pages and a folder for blog. In the pages folder, we're going to create a home page. New file. Save it as home.md. So what is this home page going to look like? So this is where I'm going to bring in my snippets. Really simple. I have some metadata. This is a markdown file. That's what the MD stands for. So I have some metadata here. What's the title of the page? What's the slug? That would typically indicate what the URL to the page is. What's the date that it was published last? And I'm adding a little bit of extra metadata that you won't typically see this. So for the home page, I really need it to be saved as index.html. That's the default page that we created in CloudFront distribution. So that's what we have there. And we have some, again, English language readable text, right? This can be whatever that you want to have the content of this page. Just as a JMan the Maker, we make cool stuff. All right. So we have our home page. Let's create a couple of blog posts. We're going to use Markdown again. So making stuff is an art, and it has a tag of art and a category of blog. The rest you can see. I just want to point those two things out. And another page, post2.markdown. Making stuff is a science, and it has a tag of science and a category of blog, right? Let's argue with ourselves. It's fun. All right, so I'm going to come back to the command prompt. We have the shell of our site, plus we've added some content. So there's this make file here. We'll look at that, like I said, in another minute. But there's a command in the make file that says make HTML. And that's going to pre-generate the site. So we have 2 articles processed and 1 page, which exactly matches what we created. So now I can run make serve. What this is going to do is bring up, launch a local web server on my laptop here. If I go to 127.0.0.1 on port 8000, we could see the site that we just built, right? Here it's a little bit prettier than just the blank old text that JMan the Maker would make cool stuff. We have a link for the homepage. We have in the title bar, and we have a link for the blog. If I click on the blog, you can see our blog posts. So it's that simple to build a site with this tool, but we have a lot more to do. So let me drop back to the command prompt. I wasn't a big fan of that theme, so let's say we want to get a new theme. Let's say you want to use Twitter Bootstrap. So I'm going to clone an open source theme that's out there in the market. There's tons of these. If you do some searches for Pelican and themes, you'll see them all. So I'm going to do a git clone here of a Pelican Bootstrap theme. And we'll use that throughout the rest of the site. I also have to do actually one other clone. And that's for an image viewing library called Galleria. So we'll use that later on in the admin page. So I figure I might as well get it right now. OK, so we have our 2 libraries that we're going to reference. Now, to change the theme, it's really quite simple. So there's a Pelican configuration file. And we just add the text theme equals Pelican-bootstrap3. All right, super simple. And that's all we need to do there. Now, I want to show you that, what it looks like with the changed theme. But rather than running the local web server, we're going to publish it to S3 and see it in action as long as CloudFront is ready. I'm hoping it is. So we're going to edit this make file. This is when we ran make HTML before. This is what actually got run. So I'm going to edit this make file to include a clean directive. That's one of the other things, just as part of the make HTML. You could do these as separate. I just want to combine them for the purposes of time. And add a bunch of other stuff here. So this is going to say make an output directory to support that I can copy that Galleria viewer to. And then this is the command line tool that we're going to run. AWS S3 sync the contents of the output directory. So that's what the Pelican is going to generate as content in that output directory. Sync that to WEB203.origin. And this is a very, very, very important part for the development. So I want to make sure you call this out. This is saying add a cache control header to every object to have a max age of 0. What this is going to do is make it so that while we're editing the site, it doesn't get cached on us, right? So the default behavior of CloudFront is to cache objects for 12 hours. So this is going to say only don't cache it at all, right? Just every time that somebody comes in, make a new request for it. All right, so now we have a new theme, and we're going to try publishing this to S3. So make HTML. So you can see the pages were generated, and now we copied it to our S3 bucket. I'm just going to take a quick peek here to see if the CloudFront distribution is ready. It still is in progress. Very likely it's reached our edge location. Let's see what happens. Let's try and hit it. web203.jmn.ws. All right, so this is the certificate error I told you about that was going to happen. It's because we didn't upload our custom certificate. So I'm just going to proceed anyway. And look, here comes our site, right? So this is serving out of CloudFront, backed by S3, and published. It's now Twitter Bootstrap. We have a home page. We have our blog. We have our tag cloud here with art and science. And the category is what shows up here in the header. All right. So are we done? Not quite, right? We still have to do the hard work of letting people upload photos and an admin page. So let's drop back to our text editor. So the next page is, like I think I was going to call it Start Making. So let's save that as Start Making. And we're going to use restructured text here, RST, instead of Markdown. The reason I'm doing that is because for the rest of the time, we're going to be doing a lot in raw HTML and JavaScript, and restructured text has this great directive of raw : HTML. So it's going to let us literally write HTML and then publish it through the Pelican engine. So if we look at this bit of code, and again, like I said, this video will be available to you. So I know I'm going to go fast, and I'm actually just going to accelerate. It might seem like I'm going fast, but I'm just going to be accelerating as we go here. So the video will be available to you. Follow along, on the video. All right, so this is going to let a person take a picture with their camera, or click a button that says Browse and find a picture on their laptop. We'll allow for an email and an upload button and some results to say, OK, was the file uploaded? But the thing is, we actually aren't doing anything yet, right? So there's no JavaScript here to say what should happen. So I'm going to add some JavaScript that is going to, basically, the first bit here is loading, getting handles to everything in the form. I have a function to just get a random file name. And then here's the important part, which is saying, all right, when you click on the button to do the upload, let's handle that function. So first I'm going to say uploading, get the file, create an AWS.s3 object, give the file a name, set up some parameters, and call a put object request. Make a call to the put object method on the S3 object. So I very quickly glanced over this line here, right? What is this AWS.s3 thing? So that's something that's part of the AWS JavaScript SDK. So we got to reference it, right? We haven't referenced that yet. So if we can go to our Pelican Bootstrap 3 theme and bring up the templates. There's a base template. And I'm just going to scroll down here a little bit to the close of the head, right? So this is every page that we're going to render is going to have the content of this base template. And we're going to include, oops, sorry. Here we go. We're going to include some reference to the to jQuery, which we're going to use. We're going to include the reference to the Galleria and to the JavaScript SDK. So that's in our base page. Now it makes sense to have this call to AWS.s3, right? So that's going to get us an S3 object, and we're going to make the call to the put object. But what we haven't talked about yet still is how are we authenticating, right? Anybody, I don't want just anybody, I don't want to give everybody full control to my bucket, right? So how is it that this person who's going to bring up this site is going to have permissions to upload? And to do that, we're going to add a little bit more code. So this is going to make setting up a call to Amazon Cognito. It's going to assume a role of unauthenticated user. And we'll take a look at that in just a second. And as long as it has an identity, then basically part of the JavaScript library is so that any other calls using that JavaScript library on this page will use the identity that's already been created by Cognito. All right, so what is all that stuff that I just talked about? So let's go back to the management console. Click on Cognito. So this is an identity pool. I just called it WEB203. And a web identity pool is really not much more than a label. If I click on an edit identity pool, one of the things that you'll see, and we'll come back to the public identity providers bit, but for right now, one of the things that you'll see is that we're enabling access to unauthenticated identities. I really do want anybody to be able to upload to this bucket, but I don't want anybody to be able to get any objects from this bucket, right? I don't want you to see, what somebody else uploaded. Only I should do that as the administrator. So I want anybody to be able to upload, and so we'll use this unauthenticated identity. And when you create the identity pool, it's going to automatically create a role for you in IAM, Identity and Access Management. So if we go to that role, unauthenticated users, we'll have some policies that I added. And so this is going to say, put objects to this one particular bucket. I may have a bunch of other buckets on my account. Nobody else will be able to upload to any other bucket besides web203.uploads. OK, so I think we're good. Let's make sure I saved everything. And go back to the terminal to make HTML. Actually, there's one other thing I want to show you from permissions before I actually bring up the page. And that's back in S3, another important security thing, if you do try and follow along with this when you get back home, is you'll need to set the CORS property, cross-origin resource scripting capabilities on the bucket. So if we click on permission, there's a CORS configuration here. I'm sorry, wrong one, wrong bucket. So there's an uploads bucket. If we click on the properties, edit CORS configuration, you'll see that I'm allowing put object requests. OK, so if we come back to the browser, I refresh the page. We now have a Start Making tab there. Let me just actually refresh that. OK, we have an identity. So this will allow me to choose a file. If I click Choose a File, I have an image all set here to go. Give it some, an email address. Whatever, doesn't matter. Thank you, you have back from us soon. So that shows that the file has been uploaded. If we go back to the management console, there were 2 here. I'm not sure if somebody maybe uploaded while we were here or maybe had some things in there in the bucket from before. But if we go to the uploads bucket, we'll see that there's 3 files there now, right? So it's actually just a folder, but if we go into the folder, you'll see the actual file. And I just did that so that there's no name collisions on any of these folders, so it has a random GUID. All right, so we're getting further, right? We have a home page, we have a blog, and we're able to upload files. Now, how can I make it so that me, as John Mancuso, the site owner, can see everything that's been uploaded? So let's build an admin page. Let's come back to our text editor, new file, save, admin.restructuredtext. And here we go again. We have an admin page. We're going to use login with Amazon. So that's what this whole bit is about here. This comes directly off the sample code from login with Amazon. So one of the resources is going to talk about that. So you literally can just copy and paste that. We're also using Galleria for displaying of the images like I talked about. So this is setting up the page, but we don't have any script to actually do anything with it yet. So let's figure out how we're going to load the images. And first, with the login, first we got to authenticate, right? So with login with Amazon, think of it as the same as like logging in with Facebook or Google, same kind of ideas. You can use any of those public identity providers. It does not have to be login with Amazon. So this is just the code again to when you click on the button to say authorize it, and you'll get a response back that says you're logged in, right? If it's a valid Amazon.com login. So that's going to authenticate you from login with Amazon perspective, but what is it going to authorize you to say I'm an admin on this page, right? There's a difference between authentication and authorization. So we're going to use Cognito for the authorization bit. And here's the Cognito code. It's pretty much the same as what we saw on the other page. The main difference is the role. So the role here is authenticated, auth, instead of unauth, right? That's the role that we're going to try and assume. And it's going to accept the response.access token. So the response that we got here is the response from login with Amazon. Amazon.login.authorize is going to come back with the response. So that's what we're passing in, the access token that came back from Amazon. And so that's what we're going to use to see whether or not this person is authorized to do anything in the admin site. And so after that, we're going to, if we're authorized to do something, then we can call a getImages method, right? I haven't written that yet, so let me add that in. But right now, I just want to show you that's what's going to get called. So let's go add getImages. Oops, sorry. Before. OK, so getImages. So what this is going to do is look at DynamoDB. DynamoDB, we haven't talked about that at all. So I'll come back to that. It's going to call DynamoDB and find out what images that we need to load. Based on that, it's going to add images to the Galleria viewer. So where did this DynamoDB stuff come from? Well, if you saw the cloud functions earlier today, that's the best place to be adding this information to DynamoDB. Since it wasn't available when I wrote this, what I'm going to do is go back to our start making page and say, after we've put an object to S3, that's just a comment there. It's a little funky to look at it on the screen. But after we've put an object to S3, let's also add a record to DynamoDB saying that we put this object there. And I'm doing this so that maybe this is going to contain more information about the work item that you've done. Maybe when you pull up a record, you might want to say, OK, I've started work on it. I've completed work on it. So this is going to be how we're going to track information about the object that got added, or the object that was uploaded. All right, so there are still a lot to come back to talk about, but I think we can upload this site. So make HTML. Right, so let's go and look at this. So if I refresh my page here, we now have an admin tab. If I click on the admin tab, it's got a login with Amazon button and this Galleria image viewer. If I click login with Amazon, it's going to pop me up into a window that's says use your Amazon credentials to log in. So I have something pre-cached here. I'm going to sign in with our secure server. Now, there's no images here because when I uploaded the last one, we didn't have the Dynamo bit. So I'm going to take a picture right now. Oh, shoot, I turned my phone off. I didn't want it to ring in the middle. Let's see how quickly this thing can come alive. I think it's much better to show the actual audience. All right, while that's coming up, let's talk a little bit about some of the things that we use there. So we used this login with Amazon. How did I set that up? Let's go to that first, login.amazon.com. This is not part of the AWS bundle of services. This is an Amazon service. So if we go to login.amazon.com, I can click on the app console. sign into the app console. I have already, again, like I said, have my account created. So I'll sign in here. I have a couple of applications. The one that this is associated with is this JMan123. So if we look in the JavaScript code, we'll see a reference to this client ID. That's how it knows which application to use. It's going to allow an origin of web203.jman.ws. This is really simple. That's all it's doing, right? Is the person able to authenticate with Amazon? It's going to return back that token, and that's it, right? The rest is happening in Cognito. So if we come back to Cognito, we can look at the identity pool again, and we'll see that it has that app ID here. Again, that's the association. This app ID is tied to that login with Amazon account. And then if we go back to IAM, again, Cognito is going to create some roles for you. If we go to IAM, we have the auth role. And what this is going to allow for S3 is allow any actions, right? I should probably have been more restrictive there, to be honest. I should have allowed only gets. But it's going to allow any action to the bucket web203.uploads. And I'm going to do it for this Cognito identity.amazonaws.com.sub for this specific identity only. So any of you who have a login with Amazon account can authenticate, but you're not going to be authorized to get the images. This bit of code here says allow only this one ID, this admin ID, to be able to get this. And you can have a list of them here, right? You can have 10 administrators in your company. You can list them all out here. But that's what's going to happen there. If we also look at the auth role, we have rights for DynamoDB and so on. All right. So if we look at DynamoDB, I have two tables, a count table. This is just going to keep an index of how many work items need to be done, and a work item table. So let's submit something here. If I go to web203.jman.ws on my phone, go to start making, take a photo, and say use photo. Submit. I think you'll hear from us soon. So we should, if I refresh this now, we'll see another entry there too. And then, whoops, sorry, trying to jump around here. I must be totally confusing the projector. If I refresh this page, we'll see that there's two images there. I actually didn't even need to refresh. It's constantly polling Dynamo. But I'll log in again, and we'll see that there's two images. And there you guys all are, right? That's the picture I just took. So that's the demo. I want to just go back to the slide deck for just 1 second. So were we successful? Well, this site, as it's built right now, will cost you 78 cents a month to run. 78 cents a month. It may cost you more, of course, if you have a lot of data transfer, if you're storing a lot of images in S3, if you're not cleaning them out. But the base site itself is 78 cents a month. From a scalability perspective, availability perspective, we have CloudFront, DynamoDB, S3, all services that are built to withstand great amounts of load. We're using login with Amazon. Again, not something that you have to worry about from an administrative perspective in any way. Did we meet our security requirements? It has a very minimal attack surface, right? There's no web servers for you to have to patch. There's no operating systems for you to have to patch. Well, you have to, of course, be very conscious of what you're doing in JavaScript. There's no question about that. Right now, as I have it, the DynamoDB code is a very big security hole, right? Because anybody could say add a bunch of records to DynamoDB. Really, you only want to allow records getting added to DynamoDB that match the file that got uploaded to S3. So that's why Lambda functions will really come in. As soon as a file gets uploaded to S3, you can trigger an insertion into DynamoDB. It's a much better place to do it than when I did it in this code. And here are the resources. So everything from Pelican to the Bootstrap theme to the kind of reference architecture there for CloudFront and S3, login with Amazon, Galleria, all the things that I used in the talk. And that's it. So if you wanted, there's some really great workshops tomorrow along this similar vein from the mobile services on iOS and Android development. So check those out if you're still around. And thank you very much. Please give any feedback you have for the session. It's WEB203. Thank you all for sticking around.